You haven't broken down anything from the official gameplay video. You're literally just narrating what we saw in the gameplay itself. Sorry, but no. Okay, fine. Here are 100 missable details in the Hogwarts Legacy State of Play. Let's start off with a rapid fire round. And just so you know, these are not all in chronological order. Here to the right of the screen at the end of the shot, you can see what seems to be a Quidditch hoop. Now, if that is what that is, this cutscene is seen from the point of view of someone on a broom on a practice Quidditch pitch talking to someone in a Quidditch uniform. I'll let you figure out what that means. Also note the winged creature in this shot. Here, we're going to get a glimpse of the Great Hall. The house point hourglasses are still absent just as they were in the reveal trailer, so we're still not sure if there will be a house point system and if we'll be able to see how many points our house has. Here and in other places, you can see multiple students wearing Quidditch robes, further pointing to the fact that Quidditch is probably going to be in the game. In this shot, Nearly Headless Nick is talking to us about joining the Headless Hunt, and he says that this offering, and points to what we are carrying, will win them over, meaning that we are probably helping him join the Headless Hunt in this quest. Apparently though, that did not work out. Here we see the word Merlin written on a window while Professor Binns bores his students. Here we see what appears to be a bunch of foopers, some devil's snare. Here we see that the Revelio charm is used to reveal hidden objects around us, which makes sense. It's a feature that is used in a lot of video games, and the Revelio charm is a great way to bring it into the wizarding world. Here we see a giant suit of armor, maybe intended for a troll. Here we see a centaur on the grounds of Hogwarts, so either he's the groundskeeper or he's a teacher. Some instruments that play themselves, as well as a painting of a witch burning. Definitely an interesting portrait. Okay, so for a second I want to slow down and get a little bit more in depth with some of these. Here we see a painting of what appears to be Phineas Black. Could this man right here possibly be Phineas? The timeline for that would actually work. The portrait seems to be of an older Phineas, so maybe it's just an Easter egg, maybe it just looks like him, maybe Phineas was the headmaster before whoever this current headmaster is. In various shots, we see a currency known as Moonstone being used to upgrade the Room of Requirement. Now, Chandler Wood, the community manager for Hogwarts Legacy, has said that we will not see microtransactions in Hogwarts Legacy. I'm still not sure I'm a super big fan of currencies being used like this. It feels too tycoony. Okay, if we're gonna get through all 100 of these, we gotta keep moving. Here, when you see Hogsmeade Station, at the very beginning of the shot, you can barely, if you strain ears, hear the sound of a train whistle. Take a listen.
Not everything you need on your journey is not everything you need on your journey.
You hear it, you might have to wear headphones if you can't, but either way, it is there, and it almost 100% confirms that the Hogwarts Express will be in the game in some form. We also see the 3 Wizarding World currencies being used, including bronze knuts, silver sickles, and golden galleons. Also in this UI, there is seemingly a menu for this inventory as well as the shop, meaning that you can buy and sell items at least this vendor. Here we get our first look at Butterbeer inside the Hogshead. I've said this before in past videos, but for those of you who have not seen those videos, this item right here is seen in this shot, as well as the logo of the game, meaning it's very important. My guess is that it's somehow linked to this ancient power that you possess. We also see a total of 5 of these little statue things with green flames on them. 4 of these are lit with the green flames, and 1 of them is actually not lit. On each of these statues, we see the word Wildsmith, and Wildsmith was the creator of the Flu Network, which I think definitely proves that these are some sort of fast travel points. Also, the fact that these are in key locations could also point to these being fast travel points. This one right here, for example, is in a gate that leads out of Hogwarts. Perhaps the fact that this one is not lit proves that we have to discover these one by one in order to use them. That would definitely force us to explore Hogwarts before we just went fast traveling around, which makes sense. Shout out to Retro Raconteur for finding this one. On this table in the Room of Requirement, you can see a chocolate frog package, which looks very similar to the ones in the movies. Here we see Thestrals, proving that our character has seen death at some point in their life. Now I'm personally wondering if this death that we either see or cause happens before the game or after the game starts. If it happens after the game starts, maybe at some point we don't see the Thestrals, and then later on we can see them after we see or cause this death. That'd definitely be an interesting mechanic. Here we see a really cool looking cart ride in Gringotts. Now the first time I saw this clip, I did not actually understand its importance, but now that I've had time to think about it, I realized that this basically confirms Diagon Alley. It really wouldn't make sense for us to go into Gringotts without first going through Diagon Alley. Also in this shot, we see Gringotts through this wall. This is most likely our flight teacher, as we also see her at the professor's table in the Great Hall. The words on the window in the Great Hall roughly translate to learning truthful magic. In this shot right here, we get a look at how the door mechanics might work. In this shot, we see a skeleton of what appears to be a real-life rhinoceros. Here, we see the fat lady, which is obviously the entrance to the Gryffindor Tower. In this shot, we see the player retrieving a flying book using Accio, and throughout the gameplay reveal, we see similar books flying through the air. Maybe this is a way to get talent points, maybe it's a way to unlock spells, or maybe we're retrieving something for someone. Either way though, it's just something I noticed. Written on the walls of the Charms classroom are tons of spells. Keep in mind that just because the spells are on the wall here does not necessarily mean they'll be usable in game. The Charms professor here has 2 snake pins on his cloak, possibly symbolizing it is the head of Slytherin House. In the books and movies, McGonagall was the one to put the sorting hat on new students, and she was the deputy headmistress. So perhaps this lady right here, seen putting the sorting hat on us, has the same job. In case you missed it, in the background of this shot, we can see the groundkeeper's hut. And then of course there is the most famous Missable detail, and that is the date that was on the newspaper in this shot, telling us that the date that the game takes place is most likely 1890. In this shot right here, in these windows, portals, whatever they are, we see turrets that look very much like the ones from Hogwarts, so this is probably looking out onto the Hogwarts grounds. In this shot right here, we see a goblin in uniform, so perhaps this is some sort of like goblin Gringotts security guard. The 6 confirmed classes that we see in this reveal are Herbology, Charms, Defense Against the Dark Arts, History of Magic, Transfiguration, and Potions. At this part of the reveal, the narrator says that throughout the year, the seasons and weather will change, meaning there is probably only 1 year included in this game. I've said this before in past videos, but in case you haven't seen those, in this menu right here, we can see Room of Requirement upgrades, core upgrades, as well as stealth upgrades. And in the top right, we can see something called Owl Post. Now for a second, I'm going to take a break and go to the PlayStation blog post that was posted after the event and point out some details from there. Now one thing that I did not notice the first time I scrolled through this article is that there are 2 clips that were actually not in the initial gameplay reveal. The first shot was this one right here, of a student flying on a broom through the Forbidden Forest. And the second was another look at combat. And then a lot of people noticed this one, but just in case you didn't, here's another look at the possibilities of character customization. Also, I think that this line right here is very important. However, there is one more thing I wanted to make sure we address plainly. Hogwarts Legacy is a single-player open-world action RPG, where you can have NPC companions join you on your adventures. The story is about your own legacy. Now what I think they're trying to do here is make sure that nobody thinks that multiplayer is going to be in the game. I know there's a lot of people, including myself, that want multiplayer in this game, but I also understand that it's a lot to add on top of already making a complex single-player game, so I'm not really expecting it, I'm not wanting it that much. But probably one of my favorite lines in the blog post is where they said that you might come across a Weasley or 2. Now, this might just be a figure of speech, you might only come across 1, or it could literally mean you might come across 2 Weasleys. People have also pointed out that this guy right here, seen in this shot, as well as a screenshot on the Hogwarts Legacy website, might be the Weasley that they are mentioning. I've also noticed that our robes have golden lining, which none of the other students seem to have. Maybe it's just a feature by the game developers to help us stand out, or maybe we come from some sort of wealthy family. On this circus tent thing right here on the far left, we see the angry potato from the lead concept art, and then on the right we can see 3 hoops and what seems to be a quaffle flying through them. Another hint to Quidditch. Moving on, I want to point out some details that I noticed in the concept art that was seen in the behind the scenes for the game. Now obviously take all of this with a grain of salt because it is concept art, but I still think there's some interesting details to point out. In this shot right here, we can see on the right Zonko's joke shop, which I really hope is in the game. I think there'd be a lot of fun mechanics connected to various pranks that we can play on other students. It should also be noted that on the left there is a Christmas tree, so perhaps decorations will pop up throughout the year, which would be really cool. And oh, little detail I just noticed, there is a sporting shop, which means at some point in the development phase, they're planning on adding Quidditch. Guys, I really think Quidditch is going to be in this game. In this shot right here, we see something called a Tundra Gate, which is very clearly some sort of puzzle. Here, we see Hogwarts carriages being pulled by Thestrals. Earlier in the video, I mentioned that maybe you can't see Thestrals at the beginning of the game, but then later on you can once you've seen Death. Maybe this points to that, maybe it doesn't. Like I said, take everything with a grain of salt. This is just concept art. This also somewhat proves that the Hogwarts Express was planned to be in the game at some point during development, as in the books and movies, these carriages are bringing students from Hogsmeade Station to the castle. We also get a closer look at the owlery. We also get a quick look at the map. Now obviously Hogwarts is not on this, so this is not the entire game map. Here on the right we can see Honeydukes. This one right here seems to be from later in development, as these do look like 3D models, and to the right we can see Professor Fig. Here we see a door with a bunch of magical creatures along the edges, and then to the right we can see a demiguise. We also get our first look at the deviation classroom. Now because of the level of detail and just the way the window looks, I'm going to guess this is not the final model, but because it did get to the 3D model phase, I'm going to guess this is very similar to the final that we might get. Okay, back to the gameplay reveal. Here we see the player use Incendio to ward off a bunch of Inferi. This is a nod to the movies where Dumbledore also used a fire spell to ward them off. Here we see a bunch of dark wizards operating in the same way that the Death Eaters did, using this black smoke. This one is actually really interesting. Here we see our character performing the Avada curse, and if you slow it down, he's actually using the spell on a goblin. Wizarding law actually says that these unforgivable curses are only unforgivable if they're used on a human. So, technically, according to Wizarding law, no crime is being broken by using the Avada curse on a goblin. Throughout the gameplay reveal, we can see a multitude of moving portraits, and honestly, I give them a lot of respect for doing this, as they have to 3D model the contents of each portrait, and then also give it an animation that loops in some way, and that is a ton of work. Here we see our character taking care of a cat in the room of requirement, and if it's the room of requirement, which is fully customizable, this is not a randomly spawning cat, so basically this confirms pets. Here we see a giant skeleton, and some people have been saying, oh, maybe it's a dragon, but personally I think this is far too big to be a dragon. Fans have identified this dragon right here as a Hebridean Black. Here we see the Hogsmeade Ollivanders behind our player, which might be the location that we get our wand if we don't go to the Diagon Alley Ollivanders. Earlier in the video, we saw a prototype for the deviation classroom. In this shot right here, we see a professor who I'd guess is probably the deviation teacher. Okay, so now I want to point out some glitches that I noticed. Now, some of them are really bad and super obvious. I'm not sure how they got into an official gameplay reveal. So they definitely have a lot of cleaning up to do on this game before release. In this shot right here, the two buildings on the left just don't have walls. This is a really bad mistake, and I'm not sure how they missed this in a gameplay reveal that they've been building up to for this long. I just hope that they put more attention to detail into making sure these bugs don't happen in the final game. Also in this shot, when the troll breaks out of the building, the door and windows are still intact, meaning he just walked right through them. Also, throughout the entire gameplay reveal, his cloak never really seems to sit just right. It's always moving. It's always like forming a lump right there. I mean, they've made this entire game almost, and they can't get the ropes to work. These little visual bugs like this are things that you really have to fix because they can break immersion. In this shot right here, you can see our characters hand clipping through their robe. And this clip right here, out of all the other clips that you could have chosen, was the one that they chose to post on Twitter to stir up hype for this event. It's almost a blindness to see these little visual bugs. It's worrying to me. You guys really got to pay attention to this stuff and make sure it's fixed. In this shot, we can see students randomly appearing out of nowhere. And in this shot, you can see some pretty janky reflections. Okay, so back to the details. Apparently this prefect's bathroom perfectly matches the description of it given in the books. And for the 100th missable detail, J.K. Rowling has no involvement in this game, and boycotting it because you disagree with her is not doing anything. All you're doing is punishing the people who put their hard work into making this game. But with that said, that is 100 missable details from the Hogwarts Legacy State of Play. This video was super hard to make. I think it was like 4 days of recording, and these past days I had a cold, which is a real pain. But yeah, if you're interested in more Hogwarts Legacy update and analysis videos, please subscribe. That helped me a lot, and I'll see you guys in the next one.